Hello, my name is Theo and I'm from the Student Learning Support Service. In this video, we are going to discuss oral presentations with a focus on public speaking. There will be two videos on this, and this video represents the first part and it will discuss planning and structures. Let's start by thinking back about what you have seen so far. I know it has been a short 1 minute, but consider what you have seen so far compared to this. Oh, hi everyone. I'm Theo. I'm from the Student Learning Support Service, and I'm talking about oral presentations about public speaking. So yeah, what I'm going to say is going to be really important. Yeah, that's important. Take note.
So what exactly are presentations, and why has your lecturer asked you to do a presentation? Is this because, well, the lecturer just wants to torture you? Or is it because it is something which is useful? Let's examine the reasons why. First, a presentation allows you to give a quick impression of how much you have learned, how much you know within a short span of time. A 10-minute presentation can tell a whole lot about what you have learned throughout the lesson or your topic. Presentations are also a reflection of you as a student, you as a budding professional. Presentations are great to show how much you have already learned or know, especially when it comes to tasks like a literature review or something which you need to work and gather information. And that brings me to the next or the final point. Presentations are also very useful for you to understand the gaps in your knowledge. In other words, when you speak, when you present, you are able to show exactly what you know and what you haven't got to know yet. Now, think about someone who you think is a good presenter, and this could come in various different people who you have perhaps listened to either in person or through a YouTube video, or perhaps someone who you have seen on television, right? What kind of qualities or characteristics do they convey during that presentation? What exactly are they doing which is right? Some of them could be funny, some of them could appear confident, some of them could be very carefully modulating their pace. In other words, they're not going too fast or they're not going too slow, just right. And some of them could be giving really powerful speeches. Here are some of the examples of good speeches or interesting speeches. And as you can see, there are links to YouTube videos which you can watch and have an idea so that you can get some inspirations for your presentations. Now, as you watch through those videos, think about how the presenter maintains the audience attention. Now, that's a very important point to think about because a presentation could be short or long, but if if the audience finds the presentation dull or boring, the audience will switch off very quickly. So the trick is how to maintain the presentation for the span of time which you're supposed to talk. Now, as you watch the videos as well, think about the way the presenter speaks. Has the presenter modulate the pace? Has the presenter increase the tone or the voice or the loudness? Has the presenter used certain kind of visuals to help the presenter present? Think about the kind of language the presenter use. Is the language formal? Is the language informal? And when you think about that, think in terms of the audience. which the presenter is presenting to? Has the presenter delivered the talk or the presentation specifically to the audience in mind? In this short video, we will cover how to plan and structure your presentation. After watching this video, don't miss the next segment called Oral Presentation, Assessment and Nerves. Right, first, we are going to talk about planning. That's step one. Okay, let's talk about the key considerations for the planning stage. The first thing you should think about is the purpose. Now, specifically, according to Bovey and Thiel, whether the purpose is to inform your audience. For example, if you're trying to inform them about a specific process or educate them about a specific process, a scientific process, or if you're trying to inform them about literature review and so on and so forth. Next, whether you're trying to persuade, and this could be in the form of an argument, all right? So if you're trying to persuade the audience to agree with your points or your arguments, now that's something to think about. Then whether you're trying to motivate your audience to do something, and when we say motivate, it's usually to get the audience to do something after that. For example, if you are giving a talk about, say, saving the environment, and you want the audience to take some action after your talk. And lastly, to entertain, which is basically to provide a talk designed to entertain the crowd. Now, it's not something which is easy to do. Nevertheless, you can find ways to do this. The next consideration is information. Now, in this particular case, you need to think about how much information you should be giving and delivering during that talk. It all depends on the length of that presentation. All right. If it is a short presentation, naturally you will be limiting the amount of information. And if it's a long talk, you will be giving more information. Nevertheless, it is a good idea not to over-inform or under-inform your audience, because the audience will either switch off if you over-inform, or the audience will find that information is lacking if you under-inform. So finding the delicate balance is important in this case. The next factor to take into consideration is the audience. Now, it's important to think about the audience. I mean, the whole point of giving a presentation is to present to an audience. Of course, your audience will have your members such as your lecturer or your tutor. And of course, you will have people who watch your presentation as well, including perhaps your fellow students. Now, the audience is important to consider because they will determine the mood of your presentation. So if the audience switch off, all right, you will find yourself panicking because you will generally need to keep them engaged. The trick is to consider the demographics of your audience. What keeps them engaged? What are the things which are going to make it interesting for your audience? It could be things such as graphics, it could be stuff such as videos, it could be stuff such as your own personality. Many different factors take part into in this. Having said that, also consider the time of the day when you do the presentation. If it's just after lunch, people could be sleepy, and therefore the presentation could be a bit more difficult to do in terms of audience engagement. So you need to be a bit more creative when it comes to that. Finally, think about the message which you want to present to the audience. The message is the takeaway from the entire presentation, be it whether they should be doing something after the presentation, be it whether they should leave the presentation with a sense that they have learned something, or perhaps the sense that they are now more motivated to do something. So the message at the end needs to be strongly cultivated or strongly presented so that the audience leaves your presentation with the feeling that, hey, I have actually learned something, or I have actually been persuaded to do something, or I have been motivated to do something. Now, other factors to consider when you plan your presentation include the venue. All right. The venue is important because it will determine many different factors. For example, if the venue is small, it may make it more cozy and more comfortable for you to have personal interaction with your audience. But if the venue is large, you may need to raise your voice, or we call throw your voice. And it depends whether the venue has been arranged in, say, a semicircle formation, or whether your participants audience sits in a lecture hall kind of format. Now, it all affects the interaction which you will have and develop with the audience. The next thing will be equipment, all right? And well, if you are presenting in a lecture hall, naturally, most lecture halls are equipped with a projector and a computer with PowerPoint and so on. But if you have to present in a place which is, say, has less technology, that could be a little bit more difficult. One of the things to consider in terms of equipment is whether there is a podium or a rostrum. Now, this is important because when there is a podium, and if you're expected to stand behind a podium, it means that your movements are very, very limited. But if there is no podium, you could actually make use of the stage or the area which you are supposed to present to move around slightly, not too much, so that the audience attention can be focused on you. You also need to have a backup plan just in case all the technologies don't work during that day. For example, it is a good idea to print your presentation or PowerPoint presentations on paper, so that you could actually refer to them in case, say for example, there's a blackout, or if any of the equipment does not work. There's also a consideration in terms of timing. And as I've mentioned previously, if you're presenting after lunch, it could be a bit more tricky. Similarly, if you're presenting, like if you're the first presenter for the day, now the first presenter naturally gets more attention because everyone is still very engaged and interested in what you have to say. But if you are the last presenter of the day, after say 10 people have presented before you, now there could be lethargy in the audience. So you need to find ways to actually stimulate the audience attention, and that could be something which is important to consider as well. Lastly, it has a lot to do with your personal style of presentation. Some people are funny and they rely on their personality to bring that up. At the same time, some people could be very focused on information. And if you have information, if you're the kind of person who is information focused, you may want to rely on visuals so that the audience could see or how the information is actually affecting their flow of thoughts. While it seems odd to write your script or your what you want to present in full, it is actually a good idea to do so. All right. So usually, what good presenters do is they write the entire speech or entire talk in full, and then reduce it to dot points, okay, or just key points. Now, why is it useful to write in full? It's because when you write in full, you understand what you want to present better, and then you are able to control the process flow or the flow of thoughts much better. Finally, all right, you'll be able to determine if you have used sufficient sources or authors to support what you wanted to say. Now, once you have written the entire speech in full and you're happy with that speech, it is time to reduce that into dot points. So what are the steps to do? First thing, step back and think about what your key points are. Usually, every paragraph is a point. Just like an essay, think about which points you want to focus on. And often, for a presentation, you want to limit that to 3 or 4 points because you don't want to overload your audience with too many points, which will confuse everyone. Then, transform your papers into dot points with short explanatory messages or passages. Finally, read aloud to determine if your use of language is correct. In other words, you want to think about how to reach the audience in a sense of a formal language, informal language, the tone, and so on and so forth. Right. Next, you need to time yourself, and timing comes with practice, lots of practice. So if I were to summarize the whole process, when you plan, first, write in full the entire speech or the entire talk. Next, think about the points or minimize the points into 3 or 4 points. Then, arrange your points into the sequence which you want. All right, and think about the flow of your points. Finally, consider your audience and practice your timing. Which brings us to the second issue to consider, structure. When you write your paper in full, think of your paper like storytelling. Okay? With every story, with any essay, you have a start, a middle, and an end. So think about the introduction, as in how you're going to introduce your topic. Think about the points which you are going to introduce one at a time. And finally, think about how you're going to end your presentation. In the introduction, think carefully about the following. The introduction is usually very short, around 2 to 3 minutes, but you need to do the following. One, introduce yourself and your topic. So it provides the audience an idea of who you are and what you're going to talk about. Then you need to provide a general overview of your whole presentation, kind of like a thesis statement. Then some people may want to pinpoint specifically when they would like questions to be asked. There are presenters who prefer questions to be asked at the end of the presentation because they don't want interruptions while they're presenting, while there are some presenters who are okay with people asking questions throughout or the presentation. That's your option and your choice. Think about what your main arguments or take-home message will be and pinpoint that during the introduction as well. And then all these should be included in the introduction. Remember this, the introduction is important because it sets the mood and the tone for the entire presentation after that. The middle portion of your presentation, which arguably is the most important portion and probably the longest, will consist of the following few things. First, this is where you clarify and unpack your key points. This is where you actually highlight your arguments, provide the evidence. All right. Your key points need to flow logically, kind of like a story. So point A will lead to point B will lead to point C, and so on and so forth. That's how you keep everything cohesive so that your audience can understand specifically how one leads to the next. Here is also where you show the depth of your knowledge. This is where you actually mention the key theories or use graphs or graphics to support your main points. This is also where you show the evidence to support your thoughts or arguments. During the last few minutes of your presentation, you want to wrap everything up in a conclusion. First, you want to summarize your main points so that it sticks to the memory of your audience. You want to make clear that you have actually delivered what you promised to do in the introduction. You may also want to provide some acknowledgements or references to the works which you have mentioned. And lastly, you want to thank the audience for listening and open the floor for questions. Okay, let's summarize what we have learned about a typical structure for presentations. Start with the introduction. Shouldn't be too long, 2 to 3 minutes. Introduce yourself, introduce the topic, and set the tone for the rest of the presentation. And the middle portions will consist of all your main points. Shouldn't be too many points. It should be around 3 to 4 points, and focus on how to persuade your audience so that they understand and to agree with your information. Finally, conclude strong. Reiterate what you have presented by summarizing. Show how the key points have been delivered in your introduction, and don't forget to thank everyone. Then open the floor for questions.
As you can see, planning is a very important component of a presentation. It is important that you plan well, and when you plan, think about the structure, because the structure is going to dictate how your ideas flow, which means that doing this well will allow the audience to understand your presentation better. That's all for now. See you next time. Bye-bye.
What other resources are available for you to learn more about presentations? You can watch the video on oral presentations visuals to learn how to create effective visuals for your presentation. Or you can watch the second half of this presentation on how to handle assessments and calm your nerves.